Thanks for catching up with us in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. We are in the studio that they provide for us, which is second to none, as is our special guest. Combine week in Indianapolis just concluded. Charles Davis was there, and he is the analyst for the Combine. He's analyst for CBS. He's an analyst for NFL Network. He's an analyst for NFL Sirius Radio. XM Sirius Radio. I mean, he covered the Combine from top to bottom. So figured, let's get his perspective. Get his perspective on prospects, get his perspectives on the Combine itself, the future of the Combine. Anything NFL, Charles Davis has an opinion on, and it's a very, very well-researched, thoughtful opinion. Charles Davis is an outstanding communicator. He tells us all about the Combine, things he heard at the Combine, fills us in on what's going on in the National Football League. We know there are a lot of things you could be doing, so we're very, very pleased and proud when you decide to join us in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics, coming to you from the studio they provide for us, which is second to none, as is our guest. He's one of one. Forget second to none. This guy's one of one. I'm talking about Charles Davis. All right. Football analyst. You know, you've seen him doing games, NFL, CBS with Iron Eagle. He's worked with Fox, he's worked with Turner, TBS, he's worked with ESPN. The voice you hear on NFL Madden as an analyst is Charles Davis since like 2017 or something. But this past week in Indianapolis, there was nobody any busier, that's for sure. SiriusXM NFL Radio with Solomon Wilcots. Listened in the mornings, it was outstanding. And then NFL Network coverage television-wise with Rich Eisen, Daniel Jeremiah. I think Kurt Warner might have been in there at some point with you guys. I mean, it was just really good. I mean, soup to nuts coverage of the NFL draft, as only Charles Davis can do it, because, my man, when Charles Davis, picture of Charles Davis, the word communicator, it should be right there, just like the dictionary, man.
You're so kind, Lap. I really appreciate it, Dave. I really appreciate it a bunch. And yeah, we were there, and Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah, faces of our franchise. They're the ones, and I don't think that anyone does it any better as a TV evaluator, right, than Daniel Jeremiah. And that's that's no disrespect to anyone else, although sure. You and I both know as soon as you start a sentence with no disrespect means someone's about to be disrespected. So I try not to do that. But look, there are so many great ones out there, right? Mel Kiper, if you see Matt Miller, Jordan Reed over at ESPN, yep. DJ, Bucky Brooks at NFL Network, Lance Zierlein over there working, for our coverage, you mentioned all the people. Just want to make sure Stacey Dales was down doing some incredible player features. That she was down on the field. She was amazing. Peter Schrager, Chris Rose. I joined them up on the concourse desk before I went down on the field. Pretty fortunate to work with each and every one of those people. I learned from all of them as well. And, I learned from you when you and I talk. And I've been trailing you around, Dave Lapham, since probably the early 2000s. So, when you issue that court order to keep me away, 200 feet away because of the reason I'm stalking, it's been a long time I've been following you around and soaking up all that knowledge. So thank you.
It's been great getting to know you, not only as a broadcaster, but as a human being, because you're outstanding, man. There's nobody better walking this earth than Charles Davis as a person. There's no question about that. So let's talk about the week you spent at the Combine. The Combine is morphing a little bit. It seems to be always, a little changing. There's always a need for a Combine in some way, shape, or form, though, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there is, Dave, and I like how you framed it. It is morphing, right? But you keep me honest here, okay? Let's go back a ways, all right? Yeah. when we talked about the combine, let's call it 10 years ago, it was almost reverential tones about it, wasn't there? The old school guys were in charge of it.
Yep.
There was going to be no crowd in there at all because that was distracting and it wasn't, respecting the work that was going on. Remember, the old school guys were like, there'll be no fans in here, period. It's busy. This is serious work. There's also, if a kid didn't work out at the combine, there's a lot more, I would dare say, call it criticism of that youngster who did not work out at the combine. If a quarterback chose not to throw at the combine, we really dissected that quarterback. Oh, is he a competitor? What's going on? What is he worried about? All of those things. 10 years later, quarterbacks announced they're not going to throw. Okay, we'll see him at the pro day.
Yep.
Right? Kid's not going to work out. We don't even care the reason anymore.
Right.
Some of it's medical. Some of it's just, hey, I'm not ready for pro day. Now we're actually, hey, those teams that played in the college football playoffs, if they got to the semifinals or beyond, their season just ended just a few weeks ago. Understandable. And yet we still had a smattering of players who played in the championship game, Notre Dame, Ohio State, January 20th, that may have done just about everything at the combine and skipped one or two things. So
Right.
You just don't know how it's going to unfold. But I think we've gotten to the point where we just accept what they bring to us and deal with that, as opposed to railing against all the things we're not getting.
Right.
I'm an only child, Lap, so I can tell you, I will rail against what I'm not getting. Right? I am that person. But I think we've gotten past being the only child about the whole thing and realizing you just got to deal with what's out there. And if quarterbacks aren't going to throw and they're highly rated, you're going to go see them throw at their pro day. It's that simple.
It is, though, a gathering of National Football League, front office people, owners, coaches. I mean, it's right in the middle of the country. Indianapolis, it's kind of equidistant from all quadrants of the United States. And everybody, there's a lot that goes on, a lot of conversations. Trades are talked about, I'm sure. There's a lot of things that happen, at that combine. What's the most interesting thing that you heard about or overheard or anything during the course of your week?
I think, Dave, it was much more, I love that description too, because it is a general, it's like a convention, right? The whole league gets together.
Yep.
And some owners even come in for it, right? Yep. But it's GMs, head coaches, assistant coaches, and each team does it a little bit differently. And you can always tell, like the position coaches tend to watch their position and they're free to go. So they love it when their position goes early in the combine and they can get out and go home, that sort of a deal.
Yeah.
But I think the most interesting thing for me was just simply how the league continues to understand that the game has changed in terms of what you're getting out of college. Again, I go back to 10 years ago when we railed against it, when we resisted it, when we fought it, when we said, hey, the way you played in college, young man, is not how you're going to do it here in the NFL.
Right.
All right. That sort of a deal. Well, I think there's a lot less of that now, especially when you're drafting young quarterbacks and you want them to play. You've got to meet them where they live. You've got to meet them with where their strengths are. I'm pretty sure that when Joe Burrow was drafted, that Zach Taylor, right, and Brian Callahan, who was then your offensive coordinator, right, and the rest of that offensive staff evaluated Joe, understood what they thought he did, and then sat down with him and said, what are the things you like best? And then tried to incorporate those things into the offense and push it that way so that he could be comfortable early in play. Now, the beauty is a lot more of the pro stuff is filtering down. So these kids are getting better opportunities to come in, quote unquote, more prepared. And here's the other part. COVID, I will never give anything to like it was a benefit because it wasn't. We lost a lot of incredible people. It uprooted lives. It changed lives, all of those things. But we've had to adjust to it. So we gave these youngsters an extra year in college, extra eligibility. And a good number of them have taken advantage of it. So instead of getting quarterbacks where we're going, hey, he only had 13 starts in college. What are we getting? Last year's class, Bo Nix had 61 starts. I think the minimum starts was somewhere in the 30s of the 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12. That's good for the NFL.
Yeah,
And by the way, did it not translate, Lap?
sure
Look at
did.
those quarterbacks played this past year. J.J.
Yep.
McCarthy didn't play because he was hurt, but everyone else had flashes of showing exactly why they were who they were, at least flashes, if not being Jaden Daniels and being downright spectacular, and so was Bo Nix. Guess what? We're going to get the same thing this year. Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, Kyle McCord, right? Jalen Milroe, whatever
Yep.
name you're throwing out there, you're talking 30-plus college starts. That's the Bill Parcells formula for a quarterback. How many starts? How many wins? 3 years as a starter? Was he a captain? Did their team win X number of games? Guess what? The formula is back in play because for a long time we were wondering if the formula was going out. So that's what I heard a lot of was experience, starting with the quarterbacks because they're the lifeblood of our game.
Right.
But Dave, the experience is all across the board. We're not getting the the underutilized or this kid had 1 year as a starter and he's coming on out. Most of them are big 3-year, 4-year starters, extra year, stayed in school. I mean, this kid, Gray Zabel, the offensive lineman from North Dakota State,
Yeah.
he stayed, won another national championship,
Yep.
added to his resume, and then showed up at the Senior Bowl and took on all comers. And he was probably considered a second-round guy. I think he's pushed himself into the first round because of the Senior Bowl and what he's done here, what he did in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, tip the cap to him for sure. You mentioned offensive line. In my mind, looking at it, not necessarily first ballot Hall of Famer type, guy in the draft, the prospects at Indy, but man, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, the running back position, I thought there were a ton, but
Yes.
back to in the trenches, which is our podcast. I'm big on the line play and stuff, obviously, but the offensive line, particularly interior offensive line, interior defensive line, edge guys, defensive line, offensive tackles. I thought, man, there's some from rounds 2 to 6 or whatever. You're going to still have pretty darn good talent to choose from. And the Bengals,
Yes.
they've waived Sheldon Rankins, Sam Hubbard retired, Alex Kappa they've let go of as well. So it's going to be a lot different. I mean, things are going to be different personnel wise in the trenches for the Bengals. What do you think in terms of like free agency? That's coming up first, obviously. In the NFL draft, do you think that there's going to be bodies to choose from there?
A bunch of them. I think you laid it out perfectly, Dave. This is a year, Daniel Jeremiah, my colleague, as I said, who I think is the best going. He said it perfectly. We may not have stars in this draft, not as many as we're used to having where this kid's a star, but we have starters all the way through. So you're right. From rounds 2 through 7, we're going to have plenty of guys. But in the first round, I think it'll be a race between offensive and defensive linemen. How many go? Who's going to have the most go in the first round? And then within the defensive line, is it going to be more interior defensive linemen or is it going to be more edge rushers? It is a heavy lineup of people for the first round. And when I say heavy, I mean heavy. We're talking 300-plus pound guys that we're going to be talking about. And even the whippets we're talking about are 250, like a James Pierce from Tennessee. So all in all, it's a big, big offensive line, defensive line, big hulking people type of a draft starting in the first round. And then depending on how many quarterbacks go in the first round, so let's say there's 2, just for hypotheticals. That night is going to be like the convention in Indianapolis. Phones are going to be ringing across the league about people jockeying to get in position. If they didn't take their quarterback in the first round, do they come up and get one of these guys that may have emerged, not just at the combine, but in the season? Let's say Jackson Dart doesn't go in the first round. Now it's him, Tyler Shuck, Milroe. I mentioned Kyle McCord, right? Quinn Ewers from Texas. Whoa. If you didn't get him then, you're coming to get him now. And then the next group you're coming to get, I think, are the runners. Because I think the running backs. Are we getting 1, 2, 3 in the first round? Let's say we get the normal lately, which is like 1. Now in the second round, here comes everybody to go get these runners. And by the way, there are enough runners to supply you rounds 2 through 7. That's how many there are this year, just like there are with the offensive and defensive linemen going 2 through 7. And Dave, I know we talked about a certain time, but go ahead and add 5 to that, and we'll call it square.
Okay. Let me ask you then about if you're free agency. You played defensive back for Tennessee, high level. You coached college football. You know everything there is to know about handling things in the secondary. When you have Jamar Chase, who won the Triple Crown, and I mean, this guy has earned the right to be the highest paid wide receiver in football. The Bengals know that. They've admitted that.
Yep.
So you got to get him signed. But T. Higgins, the Bengals last year were 8-4 when T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both played. When T didn't, they were 1-4. So as a defensive back and as a guy that coached the position and now one of the great broadcasters in the history of the game, watching that part of the game, how different is it when you don't have, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, it's like peanut butter and jelly, but you don't have both of them, right?
You're exactly right. And it changes everything. It changes your coverages. It changes your fear level, right? It changes how aggressive you want to be, not just in the secondary, but everywhere on your defense. Because if you get in too many one-on-one situations with those two and they catch the football, they make you pay because you miss that tackle, and then one of them is running into a goalpost next in the end zone. So that's where you are concerned. And they are such a tandem. And Dave, you've watched this for a long time, so please tell me if you think I'm wrong on this. We always talk about wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, the whole deal, right? As a general rule, this is like, to me, Hollywood. There's a great expression in Hollywood. It's hard for a character actor to become a leading person. Okay? Very difficult to do. You either are or you aren't.
Yep.
Most cases, wide receiver 2 is wide receiver 2 for a reason, and it's hard for wide receiver 2 to become wide receiver 1.
Right.
The Bengals actually have a duo where if one is out, the other is easily wide receiver 1. It reminds me of Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne in Indianapolis. When Marvin finally retired after a Hall of Fame career, Reggie seamlessly became wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
That is a rare thing in this league. Very rare. People think it happens all the time. I would tell people, go and check, and you get back to me and let me know how often wide receiver 2 does so well. Because how many times have we seen wide receiver 2, I need a chance somewhere else, and they go somewhere to be wide receiver 1, right. And it never goes quite as – I shouldn't say never. It rarely goes quite as well. You're usually wide receiver 2 for a reason. Cincinnati actually has 2 wide receiver 1s, and that is really, really rare.
Certainly is. No doubt about that. So let me ask you, put on your general manager hat. If it comes down to it, do you sign Higgins or do you sign Hendrickson?
Oh, my goodness. If you have to come down to it?
Yeah, which they shouldn't. They don't have to come down to that.
Woo!
But I mean, in my mind, they can get it all done. They position themselves to do that. But would you, do you want to break up that trio of Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase at the cost of, what if it cost Trey Hendrickson? I mean, that would be a serious quandary, wouldn't it?
Well, I just heard a big thud in the background. That was Duke Tobin falling over right now, in charge of player personnel. That was Katie Blackburn going down to one knee and fanning herself and saying, "What are you guys doing to me here?"
I know.
Also, I would just tell you, I don't know if I have the guts to say it, because the last thing I want is Trey Hendrickson wanting a piece of me or T. Higgins wanting a piece of me. But I do know that they are built and constructed with Joe Burrow dealing with these guys. Age also kicks in.
Yeah.
Trey Hendrickson's a little bit older, not a ton. It's not like he's on his last legs. Guy just led the league in sacks.
No doubt.
But I do think that they would probably go in that direction with Higgins. It's just a guess.
Yeah.
Because with that offense, as high-powered as they are, we're not asking them to be number 1 in the league on defense. We're asking them to be adequate on defense. And last year, unfortunately, it got away from them. They weren't adequate on defense. Even as great as Trey was, he didn't have the help that went along for various reasons, injuries, other things, you name it. It just didn't work. But the way that they're going, it feels like offense first. Let's see if we can get the defense to a decent level, and then we go from there. But please don't have Trey Hendrickson come for me because
I hear you.
the man deserves way more than that. And all I know is you can make this case. The man led the league in sacks, and he was their only pass rush threat.
Yep.
Every team knew that, yet he still led the league in sacks.
Unbelievable. 35 sacks the last 2 years, 17 and a half sacks 2 years in a row. What?
That deserves such respect.
Yeah.
And the man goes out there and plays without gloves no matter what the weather. It's just who he is. I mean, you name it. I want Trey Hendrickson on my team. I think that they can get all of them.
Yeah, I agree.
Too. And I think that Duke and Katie and the rest of that crew are going to find a way. This is one of those things where contracts are contentious at times. But at the end of the day, this Bengals team has a window of opportunity that is still there. And if you get Higgins and Hendrickson back and keep fortifying, they're right back in the same mix. Because, by the way, last 2 years they've been 9-8, 9-8. Just missed the playoffs essentially by a game each year.
Yep.
1 year is because of Joe Burrow being hurt. Last year is because the defense just didn't hold up their end of the bargain. They're not far off.
They're not. All right, let me get you out of here on this with your GM cap. Now we talk the next Mike Gesicki, who had a great year, 1 year contract. He's a free agent.
Yeah.
And then in the trenches again, Cody Ford is a free agent, can play everywhere. They just lost their guard, Kappa. I mean, Cody Ford's going to compete for that, and he can play everywhere else. BJ Hill, it can play nose guard, 3 technique, can kick out the defensive end. Got some position versatility with Cody Ford and BJ Hill. Those guys are all important too, aren't they? You got to get everything done.
Yeah, they're very important. What they're going to have to analyze is how does their contract match up versus their age, versus how many snaps they played with the odometer on them and the whole deal. Because such a deep draft this year, you can go get players. Because this is also a franchise that has shown they're not afraid to play young people if they get them. Cordell Wilson started from game 1 as a 4th-round guard, right? So he had his struggles last year, but he's going to be fine, I think. If you're letting Kappa go, can you find a way to plug and play, whether it's free agency or through the draft? I think the answer is going to be yes on that. BJ Hill and crew, the same thing. So these are the decisions that Duke and the rest of the crew are going to have to make. You'd love to have them all and run it back with all your guys.
Right.
But if you're going to sign Higgins, if you're going to sign Hendrickson and all, you may have to go younger and go with less contract and find guys who can play right now. And that means the onus is on Duke Tobin and crew and all these coaches, because they really do a lot of their own evaluating in Cincinnati. Who you like in the draft, who you like in free agency, and then you've got to coach them up so that they are ready to play. Everyone's going to say, hey, we want to do it like Philadelphia, right,
Yeah.
Dave? We're going to build with the offensive line, the defensive line. Okay, here's what you have to do. It's not just saying you're going to do it. You've got to draft the right people. You've got to sign the right people in free agency, and you have to coach and develop them. Philadelphia has done all of those things. That's why they've got what they've got.
Right on.
If it was that easy, we'd have 32 teams saying, guess what? We've got the same offensive and defensive lines too. I will leave you with this, Dave. In Indianapolis, I heard this conversation. Someone was talking about Philadelphia and talking about another team was saying, hey, I think our defensive front's as good as Philadelphia. And they go, well, maybe, but Philadelphia's got 4 more behind them. That's where things change.
Howie. Oh, man. Howie's the man. I'll tell you what, that you hit on it. To me, it's the double D. Draft is one thing. You got to put your bat in the ball there. But, man, you have to come back to the plate and get at least an extra base hit, if not a home run, when you're developing these guys, man. You got to draft and develop. I mean, it's
question.
He's
Take Jordan Davis, for example, in Philadelphia. They got him in the first round. The question on him was stamina. How many plays will he play? Didn't play a ton at Georgia. His rookie year at Philadelphia, I think they still have those kind of questions. Last year, he played more plays than he's ever played. He played at a higher level. Sometimes it takes time for maturity to kick in. And Jalen Carter, who they ended up getting because he was the best player in the draft, but then we had the off-field incidents. We had question marks, and they dropped all the way to 9. Howie Roseman went up to 9 to get him.
Yep.
And this year, I'm watching the divisional round playoffs against the Rams, the game in the snow. They got tight late. And how did they close the game out? Jalen Carter with a sack on 3rd down. Jalen Carter with pressure in the face of Matthew Stafford on 4th down, forced the incompletion. And that would have been 95% of the plays on defense for a 320-pound defensive lineman. Draft, develop. Philadelphia does it as well as anyone.
Bingo. Well, I'm just thrilled to hear that my opinion about the interior and edge defensively in the interior, where the Bengals need help, they got to firm up that pocket for Joe Burrow. This draft is got that in spades. Charles, I can't thank you enough. I know you're as busy can be. You're a great friend to give us the time that you give us, and your perspective is second to none. I value your opinion on anything with respect to football. You are football, man.
Appreciate you. And it's right back at you, Dave. I want you to do me a favor at some point. Take a look at some of these interior offensive linemen. Tell me guys you like, so I make sure I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
There's a kid from Kentucky named Cox who plays center.
Yeah.
Let me know what you think, because I think he's a plug-and-play center in this league, and he's getting overshadowed by so many guys around him. But what they've done at Kentucky over the last 5 to 7 years is they've developed offensive linemen. They have a name for it. They call themselves the Big Blue Wall.
Yeah.
And he's the latest to come out of the Big Blue Wall. And let me tell you, for a Tennessee guy to talk nicely about a Kentucky, he must be a player. That's all I'm telling you. All right.
I'm telling you.
Because we don't do that with Kentucky guys. All right. But he can play. And the corner out of Kentucky, Maxwell Harrison, blew away the combine. He was hurt a lot of last year, so people forgot about him. I think people know who he is now. He could easily be a first-round corner.
They get linemen, they get interior defense, and they get big horse up front. I mean, Stoops is doing a heck of a job, man, and he knows.
Doing a great job.
Build it inside out, man. Yep.
Doing a great job. And you got a 25-year-old quarterback at Louisville that can play. Don't worry that he's 25, Tyler Shuck. That stuff is out the window these days. No one cares. Can he come in and play? And by the way, I think being 25 and coming into the league at quarterback is an asset. I get a mature kid who jumps into my huddle instead of a kid jumping in with a bunch of grown men wanting to know if this kid's got it. 25 years old, married, 4 degrees with his college schooling. I don't think he's going to jump into a huddle intimidated.
Right on, man. You are the best. Like I said to start it off, Charles Davis, one of one. Can't thank you enough for your time.
Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure to spend time with you. You take care of yourself.
You too. Totally enjoyable, my man. Hey, Dave Lapham here. While games are over for the season, there's no off-season for the First Star Media Group or First Star Logistics. Join me in the trenches and Joe Goodberry of Bengals on the Brain here on the First Star Media Group YouTube channel. First Star Logistics gave away great prizes during the season, which will continue with exclusive content and special giveaways during the off-season. So please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to help us continue to grow the channel.